All kinds of things. Yeah.
Okay. So you've made this. I want us to sort of plug now into the church, and just understand where it goes, because you've made this commitment. God, use me. I want to work for you. You've got all this skill and training, and so now where does that story go? Well, first of all, in fact, how is the church seen at this time? You see, what churches exist, what churches are there, where are people going to church?
All the usual churches were there. There was, of course, what I call the original institutionalized churches, like the PCA and the Anglican Church, St. Andrews, if we look at Nairobi. Nairobi Baptist Church was there. CTAM was there, and so many others. Churches like Crisco, which were more Pentecostal, evangelical. Grassroots churches were there, Deliverance Church, and all of these churches you hear, many of them started way back there, They've been there. I think in the 70s, people probably looked at churches more like who are the formal ones and who are the indigenous ones. But by this time I'm talking about, I don't think that divide was so much there.
Okay.
A lot of Kenyan-led churches were coming up at that time, with various levels of success or impact. And the roots of some of those churches you see, thriving and blossoming even now.
Yeah.
We were in that gospel group I spoke about, able to be involved in quite a lot of the forums that they put together, because it was essentially not a music group, it was a worship team.
Yes.
That did songs as well,
Did you have any of your own compositions at the time?
Yes, I started a couple, and there were also a couple by various members of the group that we were able to arrange. A member of the group who I discovered in that group was John Wangai Kamau, a guitarist and singer, who actually was in Lenana School. He was my junior. I didn't really know him. But he says he was in Lenana School. I said, oh, I hope you didn't see too much, So it was, it's funny how, God brings things around.
Yes. So what era are we talking about now?
We're looking at 1985, 86, 87.
Okay.
86, 87. That was a very concentrated, there's a place where I sort of took a back seat and said, okay, I've been there, I've hustled, let me just sit back and learn. I may be in my late 20s or whatever, but let me just sit back and learn how this whole church thing works. The whole thing about self-promotion and humility, those dichotomies about hustling and allowing God to do it, about announcing yourself and decreasing so that God increases. These are things...
Must have been new.
Well, growing up in the Anglican Church and being around all of that, you hear the sermons, but now this is life, this is you. You've said you want to do this or be this or no longer be that. So how's this going to work? And so taking a back seat was good in that, yes, you chill. It was not so good in the sense that maybe the advancing of what you're able to do is not as focused as it could have been. But then I say a learning process always sometimes requires a shifting of gears, and when you're in that, you can't push yourself all out.
Yeah.
I don't regret it. Okay. I reflect on it and say, okay, it was a necessary.
Are you married at this time?
Yes.
When did you get married?
Got married in 88. Yes.
Okay. So let's continue then into this 88. You get married, and now where does the rest go? Where does the story continue?
Still involved with this group to a certain extent, but by this time much more involved in the International Christian Center, the ICC, and much more involved in building a family and in learning about life, about God, about truth, about how imperfect we are, how irrelevant we can become. if we don't focus on God-given mandate, God-given gifts, and a God-driven agenda for what impact you want your life to have.
Okay, go on that.
A very huge part of that process was the influence of my wife in my life and in my understanding of what this should all be, how this should all be, why this should all be. She's been a pillar.
Still is.
Still is.
Yeah. Okay, so do you still remain in ICC now? The years go on.
We were there for about 7 or 8 years until we felt, God is calling us into, we didn't know what.
Can you remember some of the songs? In fact, can we have a intermission music break?
Songs.
And anything from back then that you may have composed or even played?
Oh gosh, you mean during the ICC years?
Yes.
Yeah, you're asking me to sing? She's the singer.
Okay, no.
She or my sons are the singers.
I'm asking you to even display.
Can I remember? Oh gosh. Let me see. Jazz, can you remember anything?
Did you record anything in this period?
Yeah, we recorded
original compositions.
Yes, we recorded songs that we had written for the musicals in ICC. 2 or 3 of the musicals, and we also, over a stretched period of time, recorded 3 albums of Joyce's.
3,
but they didn't really receive wide because we didn't, pushing and
the marketing and all that,
and the cost of producing cassettes, and we're at the place now where we have catalogued everything we ever wrote or did, and want to see how to, get all of that going.
Whoa! For her?
For all of us, both of us.
Okay, so okay. We'll come back to the piano. Yeah. I'm just trying to get myself a live concert.
Yeah.
So you spend this time in ICC. In this period is also when you've recorded her first album, her second album.
Second, yeah, and yeah, even third, yes. Well, second, yes.
And are you taking this across to different churches? And
no, we went, as they say, touring the act. No, because it wasn't about touring the act anymore, in that sense of the word.
So why did you record the albums then?
We just felt there would be an inspiration and a blessing to those who hear. Yeah.
And are you still in the agency world, or
yes,
or now less involved, or you're dabbling in both?
Dabbling in both. Although the DNA of the agency world was beginning to change, and there were aspects of having to get a job that I really didn't want to, get into.
Okay.
Yeah.
So okay, let's enter into the 90s, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So what happens now? Going.
So we get a formal blessing and release from ICC.
But by this time they have moved to Ufungamano.
Yes, by this time they've moved to Ufungamano.
Yeah, and you've been, and all this time you've still been the worship pastor.
Yeah. Well, they didn't call it pastor that time, just worship leaders. Yeah. In fact, when we joined ICC, the worship leader at the time was Philip Kitoto, who is now, I think, the bishop of.
Yes.
So we were on team with him and his wife for years.
Whoa.
And we found him there, and when we left, he was still there. He eventually became a pastor, and now he's the bishop of the group. Yeah.
Okay, so they give you the formal blessing that you can leave. Where do you leave and go to?
We didn't know where we were going to go. We just knew God was calling us out. Eventually, by reason of a lot that we had learned or been taught at the ICC, and by reason of the mentoring of worship teams that we developed at that time, we knew the call was to develop worship leaders, musicians who are in the church. And it is very interesting because snap, people started calling us from Eldoret, from wherever, can you train our worship team?
Wow.
And so, that's essentially what we've been doing. Fast forward, we now have a ministry whose mandate is to train worship leaders. And when I say worship, I don't mean songs. People mistake music to be worship. That's just one form of expressing it. You can express it in your work, in your parenting, in your life, in your vocation, in your business. But the training is holistic. It involves basic training in music, in vocals, in art, in stage management, in leadership, in team building, conflict resolution, in understanding prophecy, the holistic gamut of what it takes to be a leader of men in the arena of music, in whatever forum you might find yourself. A strong factor that plays in is the restoration of people's lives. I could churn out a lot of scriptures that support that mandate that we all have as believers, not just musicians. But one thing I have to add, one of the greatest things to understand, if you remember the story in the Bible of the children of Israel wandering in the wilderness towards their promised land, and at some point they started dancing around a golden calf. They had got the gold from the place they had escaped. And the gold was the tool to, I guess, enable them as they moved along. But the tool became the idol. And that's where, you know the story in the Bible where
Moses came
and, got annoyed, etc., etc. That principle still applies, especially as a believer. This is a tool. Music is a gift, is an art form, but it is also a tool. And the mistake we can make is that if the tool becomes the idol, then it's not all about you, it's all about me. It's not all about the purpose for which, but the thing itself. The Bible says God is able to, He gives seed to the sower and bread to the eater, and He's able to make all grace abound so that we, having all sufficiency in all things, will abound to every good work. Many times we get sufficiency in skill, we get sufficiency in ability, sufficiency in exposure, sufficiency in goods, but we forget that there's a so that. There always has to be a so that. And if you look at your life, I think that's what happened to me. And you're doing all these things and getting all this exposure and acquiring all these things, but it means nothing. Solomon said, all is vanity. If there is no so that in our lives, then when the resources dry up, the combustion is not there to propel us forward. And so, I came to a point in life where, it's easy to execute, sound terrific, whatever, but so what? So what? At the end of the day, when you get broke, nobody's there, by the way. But so what? Isn't it better to say, I would love to execute a painting so that someone looks with delight and feels something. I'd love to execute an architectural masterpiece so that somebody walking into the space feels a sudden peace that cannot be explained. I'd love to carve a melody so that someone gets healed of depression. That's so much more interesting. You might make money in the process, fine, no problem. But why are you doing it? At the end of the day, why are you doing it? We're talking at the time of this COVID-19 and coronavirus, when a sudden shock to the system. The earth is experiencing the equivalent of the blood no longer flowing. Humanity has stopped moving. By the way, you notice it's not bothering any other animal. Huh? It's how interesting. So in a sense,
in fact, it is making them feel like things are so good. What's going on?
They're encroaching. I understand in Venice there are little jellyfish swimming around. Here's the deal. This is a return to Genesis, when Earth had been created with all the animals. Man needs to recreate his concept of who he is, so that he becomes more relevant to life, to the earth, to God's purposes, and we become more relevant to each other.
Let me ask a question. In fact, I really like the direction that you've gone. Now, you've been with these pop musicians that are your friends, are your life, literally. And then now you make this radical shift, because the shift that you're talking about, I understand it because I've done it.
Mm-hmm.
What did they say?
Okay, let me start this way. One knee-jerk reaction I had to my change was that I kind of tried to keep my distance. You know, I was in...
You cut off.
Yeah, I was in, and not because they were bad and I was good.
For yourself.
I mean, some of these were almost lifelong friends. But it was, I think it was slightly hypocritical, if I'm honest with myself. You know, you're thinking, let me not associate with anybody I was with. That's actually not correct in retrospect. I can understand what drove me to do that. And then there was also the other side of the coin. So now you're a holy Joe, you know, kind of thing. And so, you know, just, you know, you'll come back. You'll need the money or whatever, you know. And there were those who embraced it because maybe in some indirect ways they came from the same culture I did. You know, everyone did church, everyone went to weddings, everyone went to funerals, everyone, you know. So people understand, you know, church is a culture that we as Kenyans understand. And many of us adhere rigorously to it, irrespective of our values or views. And I have to say this, those of us who are in the church should not presume to be holier than thou. You know, someone put it so nicely, I read somewhere, Christians are not perfect. They're just saved. They're just forgiven. And the longer one walks in this, the more true that statement rings.
Okay. Whew. So now, you and your wife begin literally, I don't even want to use the word touring, but going across the country.
Well, yes, not that widely, but here and there, and also in our home. We started from home.
So you opened up your home
too? Or we would rent a small space in a church here and there.
And people could come, people who wanted to learn about worship. And I'm not just, and again, worship not just being the music element, though that was extremely important.
The life.
The whole life.
Yes.
Let's give a tidbit to somebody who's watching. I mean, and the reason why I'm asking this is because when I look at now, there's an industry, there's a gospel industry that came after you,
actually,
and you've been honored by that gospel industry. For example, the Groove Awards for the work that you've done. But the industry versus ministry versus all of this thing. Let's go back to the genesis of when you were in your house and people would come. What are the fundamentals of some of the things that you'd be teaching them for them to understand? Oh, okay, this is what this entails.
Yeah. Let me put it in caption form, if I would.
Yeah.
And not necessarily in any particular hierarchy. Number one would be, there's a phrase I love in the Bible which says, that I would decrease so that God would increase. And we talk about being an ambassador for Christ. You know, if you talk to any ambassador in any nation, pick any ambassador and say, my gosh, what do you think about this and that happening in my country or this and that? The first phraseology that will come out of his or her mouth will be, it is the opinion of my country. That, ABC. It is the policy of our government. It is the stated intention of my president. He will never speak for himself. He will speak for the person who sent him. He will speak the policy of the nation that sent him or her. He will push for the values that his nation values. We are described as ambassadors, but many times we forget the diplomacy and sometimes it becomes all about our opinions and our stance in life. But there is a clear handbook. You know, when you buy a product, before you mess around with it, you read it. You read the handbook. Our handbook is the Bible. Our fuel is the Spirit of God that gives life and tangible substance to what we believe. And so if we are to talk about the gospel music industry, I would say that it's always important to recognize what gospel means before what gospel music is. Music is
a tool.
A tool. Music, if you want, and these are some of the things we describe, music is a language of the Spirit. I'll expand. When a little 3-year-old hears a piece of music and starts clapping their hands and laughing, who taught them that? What motivated them to do that? When you see young teenagers, suddenly, this thing comes out on the radio or whatever, and they just start. Who taught them that? Nobody. Yes, you may perfect your dancing skills, but who taught them that? When you play a song and someone starts crying, who taught them that? Deep calls to deep, and the expression of music is so deep in the psyche of a human being, and even animals to an extent, that you cannot but respond to it in one way or another. Music, and you asked earlier about the School of Worship. Music is so powerful that it is used to enhance certain values. Have you ever asked yourself, why on earth would a country bother to have a national anthem?
That's a good one.
Yeah. You watch the Olympics, and even if you hate your country and the guy wins and they're playing your national anthem, something happens to you. The power of music. These are some of the things we talk about when it comes to skills. The power of music to heal, to incite violence. Music is used in propaganda. It's used to spur soldiers and all those kind of things. Music is used to mark funerals and weddings. There's always a favorite song. You understand? And so when we're talking about the musical side of worship in terms of skill, it's not something to be taken for granted, because it gives you a passport into the heart of man. When you enter a country, you can easily be expelled.
Yep.
If you break the heart of the country. But in this realm, we get into the hearts of people, but maybe don't fully represent the full extent of the possibilities. I would say to any musician, whether they call themselves gospel, secular, or whatever it is, you have a gift that many people would die for. It comes natural, maybe you learnt it. Some people would do anything to be able to execute it. What would you like someone to say 2 or 3 years after you've passed on about what your music did to them or for them? Suddenly it's not about how much money you made, because at that point it's irrelevant.
Yep.
And why I made a reference to COVID-19 is that suddenly the human race has to start rethinking not only what it is, but why it is. And what is it going to be from this point onward? Vaccine or no vaccine.
Yep.
And it's not only about music. You may be a very good scientist or electrician. You may be a good content developer like you are. You may be an actor. You may be a good orator. What is it you are? A painter. I've seen people weep when they see somebody's painting. And arts is a form of expression in the holistic sense of the word that penetrates people's hearts. Whereas sciences kind of penetrates people's minds. And those who are gifted with the art, are we doing it so that we can chuck many hits on YouTube? Or are we doing it so that whoever happens to come across it is somehow
positively impacted.
Thanks. Yeah, that's what drives my wife and I.
You know, I'm hearing your story, and I feel like your story is very not different, but I've seen the switch in your story from this point of your life, or from the point in your life that you sort of made the decision to become an ambassador.
Yeah.
In fact, I call them sent ones, SOs, where you understand that your life is but to be used for the glory of others. You get, and in that, even your thinking of what success may mean completely switches from what the world or the millions or billions of people may see as successful.
That's so interesting. In the book of Joshua, he was told, "This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth. You shall meditate upon it day and night and do all that it prescribes." Then it goes on to say, then you'll have good success. One of the things I talk about is the difference between success and good success, as mentioned in the book of Joshua. Success is when everybody's crazy about you and they really want you, and you're making a lot of money, and you're out there, and there's nothing wrong with being out there of itself. And you're just a bomb. You're the one. Good success is when you may be there or you may not, but nearly everything you do makes some kind of impact that lasts, bringing forth fruit that lasts in the life of the listener or the person who watched you acting. And I'm not speaking from a platform of having achieved or
a pedestal.
Being a pedestal, thanks, or being superior. I think one thing about this journey is that you realize just how imperfect you are in so many ways, which is a realization you may not necessarily think too much about before. Just how imperfect we all are. None of us can claim to have got it right 24/7. None of us. Not one. And so it's just, I think, God's mercy that allows us to, be this.
Okay, let me continue with a bit of this journey, because along the way, you and your wife create this amazing human being, the first, one of your sons. So the introduction of who people think is one of the greatest producers in the country right now. What did the introduction of kids in your life do, or where does the journey continue?
Kids was an inevitability, not because of biology, but because of it's something we knew was part of the plan. And we knew that this was something we'll get into as we then shepherd them walking alongside with us. And a lot of their childhood, when we would itinerate, driving to Nakuru or Eldoret. To do the
work, yes.
They'd go along with us.
Can I just ask, is this what you've been doing from that time? Up until today?
In various renditions, not necessarily touring.
Okay, yes.
But this has taken us to quite a few places.
And we'll touch through some of them. But what I'm hearing you say is this then became your core. This then became your reason for existence. To empower worship teams across the globe.
Yes, and individuals. And one of our key scriptural backgrounds for that is found in the book of Amos 9. In that day I will restore the tabernacle of David, which was fallen. I will repair its ruins. I will rebuild its breaches so that it becomes as it was in the days of old. The repair, the restoring, the rebuilding, so that it becomes as it was when God had intended. May I get theological for a moment?
Yeah.
Now, by the way, my wife is the real theologian. She's the real theologian. But in the book of Acts, chapter 15, there was a council in Jerusalem which was put together because they were arguing about whether this Jesus thing was just for Jews
or for
Gentiles. And what clinched the deal was their remembrance of this passage in Amos 9, 11, and 12, which is repeated verbatim in Acts 15.
Yeah.
After this I will return, restore the tabernacle, etc., what I quoted. You see the different translations. And so that became the bedrock scripture upon which we based what we were doing. To see restoration of value people have for themselves, to see the rebuilding of destroyed lives, destroyed hearts, destroyed hopes, destroyed senses of self-perception in God, a sense of purpose in life. The next verse says that they may possess the remnant of Edom, which figuratively means that they can then go out and be the same for those who have been destroyed and proclaim the good news that there is hope, that there is salvation, that there is joy to be found in any circumstance. That's what drove us and continues to drive us in so many different ways. However, I remember Dennis White, who was the bishop at the CTAM churches. He was quite an inspiration. He once, maybe he had seen my youthfulness, but he came to me once and just said, "You know, Jack, remember excellence. Never forget excellence."
Psalm 33 verse 3.
With the touch of God. And he just said that 3 times and he walked away. I've thought about that so many times. So don't just say, "I'm making a joyful noise and I don't care how it sounds." No.
Skillfully.
Skillful. If you look at the building and the prescriptions Moses gave for the tabernacle, oh my God, they didn't joke. The detail covered I don't know how many chapters. So, the English phrase is, the devil is in the details. The devil will be in the details if you let him stay there. So there's got to be the touch of God that brings in excellence, that puts God in the details, and then effects what you want. So to all those absolutely incredible musicians that are out there in Kenya or anywhere else, there's got to be a so that. There's got to be a raison d'être, I think they say in French. There's got to be something that drives us beyond just getting famous and making money. Solomon said, all is vanity. You'll get to the point at some point. It may be now or 20 years from now. I did. Where what is this? It doesn't mean anything. Yes, it's good to be appreciated. We're human. It's good to be acknowledged. We're human. But I think it's better to see fruit in someone's heart as a result of what you were able to do. To see restoration.
I hear that. I hear that. And again, I'll say Psalm 33 verse 3, just from what you talk about the skill. Skillfully play an instrument skillfully. To the Lord. I want to move to what you are talking about now, taking your kids, because your 3 sons have been in this music thing crazily. I remember 2 of them were in a group of a band that I started, Zabed Shak. Jazz has produced songs for Name It, myself included, and you played a part in that. So you're talking about in the beginning of their...
Yes, one thing I had partly experienced and observed growing up is that when young children demonstrate an interest in anything, they or no, or don't make noise, or you're wasting my time. And we had purposed that whatever they may express interest in, we will follow. That's number one. Number two, we had purposed that whatever our environment was, we will make them a part of it. We just involve them, pull them along, carry them along. You know, I know on my wife's first album, we made them sing a BGV on some song. You know, they were little kids. I don't know if they were happy about that. You can ask them later. And we just made it, if we'd go and we're directing a play or a musical or something, right from when they were in the crib, you know, the younger ladies would look after them. Or when Jazz was old enough, we put him in a suit and a bow tie and he stood in front of the choir. He had actually learned all the words. So, you know, he said, you're going to sing there, you know. And
we're talking about 3 boys. So this is... and one of them are twins, just like you.
Yeah, that's a whole other backstory. And what was I going to say? If in the studio, well, if I didn't have a client, the studio was in the house, you know. They'd come in and, you know, microphone or this and, you know, what's that, and plugging in and setting up. Jazz always liked helping to set up. He even used to make his own play speakers and PA systems, and, you know, so he grew up around all of that, whether it was in a studio, whether it was in a choir, whether it was in a concert. Yeah, in fact, we have a picture of Jazz as a kid with Ron Kenoli. I remember when Ron came the first time, because we were helping with the sound, if I remember. And so we just exposed them to everything we were. And belatedly, you know, I look at a principle of parenthood just from my own experiences, or positive or negative with my own or other people. And that is a very valuable thing you can do as much as possible to give your kids is an education and discipline. But the most valuable thing you can give them is everything that you are.
It's powerful.
Everything. I also understood that, and my wife too, that the moment a child comes up to you and generates a question on their own volition, it means they have been thinking about it. And if you say, I don't have time now, that curiosity has been destroyed. But the moment you fully answer the question to the best capacity of their age group, you have now nurtured a curious mind, an exploring mind.
Added wood to that.
Precisely. And so we sought, I'm sure they might give you horror stories or they might not, but we sought as far as possible to be that. The most valuable thing you can give them is what you are and what you believe and what you do. They may pick up parts of it or none of it or things that are associated with it. And we thank God that it worked out that way.
Okay, we'll be back for the final part.
He smelled the coffee.
Yeah.